present, including the defendant. Jury is currently out of the room. Mr. Zion, anything at this time?
I think Ms. Grubb has
Ms.
something.
Grubb,
Yes.
go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to address the issue of the death certificates and how they're going to be viewed, because if there's ongoing confusion about it, we may have to actually get somebody from the Ohio Department of Health Vital Statistics here. These death certificates are public records under seal and certified. They are self-authenticating under the Ohio Rules of Evidence, Rule 902. There was a general impression left yesterday with opposing counsel and maybe the jury that we were introducing something into the proceedings that was inappropriate or under seal, meaning privileged or otherwise not available for discussion. Nothing could be further from the truth with respect to these death certificates, and I just want to clear the air with them before we proceed with another witness that may want to testify about their involvement with the death certificate with their deceased. These are, as I indicated, certified, self-authenticating. We don't need any stipulations in my view, but if the court has a different view, we will go another step and get another witness.
We have no objections. We'll stipulate to their admission.
Okay. My only concern yesterday was using the word sealed document. I didn't want the jury to get the wrong inference. I thought I explained it to them. Well,
I think I used the term under seal, which is exactly what the rule pretty much talks about. So I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, and that as long as we used terms that didn't confuse, that everybody accepts what they are.
okay. I don't particularly have a problem with the concept. It's 902 straight up.
Thanks a lot.
Okay? It's just that the way it came out, I thought you said sealed document. I didn't want confusion with them thinking it's like something special. It's like any other piece of evidence.
I'm sorry. I have a little bit of a lazy speech pattern where I let things drop and don't always project completely. So if it sounded like that, I apologize. I tried to say under seal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything from the defense before I bring the jury out?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay. Sure. Did he catch some problems from his employer? Okay.
Thank you.
Just want to get rid of the cup.
It's okay. I'm surprised that we have styrofoam cups upstairs.
Oh, no, that.
I think it's still from back. Okay. Heaven forbid that we violate the rules of green. be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You guys seem in good spirits today. We're going to continue on. Mr. Zion, or Mr. Husel?
That would be me, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Bucher.
Got it.
Call your next witness.
Thank you. The state would call Dr. Genevieve DeKiel.
Did you guys hear the name okay? She was away from the mic.
Dr. Genevieve DeKiel, DeKiel, for the record.
Okay. Just come on down. You gotta go through this little maze here.
Got it. Up here. I'll swear you in.
Okay, I need you to raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay? If you're more comfortable, you can lower your mask. Okay? I need you to have a seat, get comfortable there. You've got an aerial mic there in front of you, so you have to enunciate towards it.
Okay.
Okay? I need you to state your name and spell it for us, please.
Genevieve DeKiel, the first name?
Both.
Okay. Genevieve. Last name's DeKiel, Dekiel.
It helps my core reporter get your diction, so that's why I do it. Okay?
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. DeKiel.
Morning.
Where are you currently employed?
I work for Columbus Inpatient Care. It's a hospitalist-based group out of Columbus, Ohio. We're contracted with 3 hospitals, including Mount Carmel, now Grove City East, and a rehab hospital in Westerville.
And what's your position there?
I'm a hospitalist. I round in the hospital, and that's my sole position.
And how did you come to be in that position, starting with your undergraduate?
Undergrad was at Florida State University. Florida State University.
Okay. To help us a little bit, doctors tend to talk faster than most people. It's okay.
Okay.
One of those things. So bear with us a little bit. She's trying to record what's being said. Okay?
I forgot she's writing everything. So Florida State University, biology major, chemistry minor, and then I went to medical school at Ross University, and then I did my residency at Mount Carmel West Hospital for 3 years in internal medicine, and then I went straight to work as an internist, hospitalist is my title, at Mount Carmel.
And what are your duties and responsibilities as a hospitalist currently and since you've started at Mount Carmel?
Okay, so I work like a primary care doctor, what you would see your internist or your family med, but I'm internal medicine trained. So I work like an internist just in the hospital. My job would be admitting patients through the emergency department, taking care of patients that have already been admitted to the hospital floor, and discharging patients once they're ready to go home. And we provide 24/7 care, so my shifts vary between daytime, evening, or overnight.
Would you be what's called an attending physician?
Yes.
Can you explain what that means?
Attending physician just means that I graduated residency, just simple as that. I'm a full-fledged doctor,
Okay.
if you will.
And as part of your responsibilities of admitting patients and discharging patients, do you prepare death certificates?
I do.
Do you prepare discharge summaries?
I do.
Okay. What types of things do you do in order to prepare those documents?
I'll start with the discharge summary. Discharge summary is every patient needs one when they're leaving the hospital. So I'll go through my first step is last progress note. I take this is my practice. I take the top part called the impression from the discharge summary and essentially copy and paste that into my discharge summary and add on to it. So I'll go through the last few progress notes from the consultants that are on, any special or brief notes that have happened, and do a quick recap of the last few days or the full summary of what happened during the hospital, as well as the problem list, all the diagnoses that the patient's been diagnosed with during the hospital stay, the first one being the most immediate or why they were hospitalized, and a medication list at discharge, so that way the primary care doctor can pick up where I left off, and then anything that needs to be followed up on, so the primary care doctor it can be flagged for that person.
And what if the patient dies in the hospital? Do you still write a discharge summary?
Yes, every patient needs a discharge summary. It's one of the requirements.
And do you do anything different when preparing a discharge summary for someone who's deceased?
It may be a little bit faster just because the primary care doctor doesn't need to follow up on anything. So I'll still take that impression from the last progress note if the patient's been there for a while, and then just summarize saying what happened to lead to that person's demise.
Now let's talk about the death certificate. What do you do to prepare the death certificate?
Death certificate would be the time of death and the most immediate cause for what that patient died from. So I'll look over usually my last progress note and see why the patient was there, what happened for that death to occur, whether it was a cardiac arrest in the hospital, for example, and use an educated guess as to why that person died.
What do you mean by educated guess?
So going through all of the problems of why the person came, using my example as a cardiac arrest in the hospital. If a cardiac arrest happened, it could be a sudden cardiac death. I can use that as one of my problem lists. If the patient was there for an infection, I might say, let's say, for example, severe sepsis due to urinary tract infection as my most immediate cause. But whatever the patient was admitted for, and then what happened during the hospital stay that led to that person's death. Does that make sense?
I believe so. So you start with what they're admitted for, you said?
Yes.
And then you look through the notes?
And it might evolve. So the person might come in with one thing and die of another, but it's whatever happened that led to that person's death. That would be the first thing on the death certificate.
Okay. And is it ever the case that you will fill out a discharge summary or death certificate without ever meeting the patient?
A handful of times, yes. It doesn't happen often.
What situation would that occur in?
Where I would have to fill out a death certificate for somebody I've never actually laid hands on. If somebody came in to the hospital and I was supposed to do an admission of that patient and the person died before I was able to even go and see the patient just based on my rounding and patient load, there's sometimes less than half of a handful of times that I haven't been able to actually lay hands on somebody that has died. I'm assuming you're getting into this example.
So, well, first of all, do you admit patients into the emergency room?
Yes. Patients that come onto the floor would either be through the emergency department or a direct admission from home or from a doctor's office if they're stable. If they're unstable, everybody goes through the emergency department, and then I would admit through the emergency department.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Okay.
Thank you. For the record, I'm showing
There's some. Here.
all right, I am showing,
Hold on.
sorry. All right, I am, for the record, record showing the witness States Exhibit 7B and 7C. Could you take a look at these for me, please? And just tell me what it is that I'm showing you. Starting with 7B.
7B is my discharge. Oh, actually, it's my discharge summary. It's my history and physical stapled together.
And for what patient?
Mrs. Jeremiah Hodge.
And what's the admission and discharge date there?
The admission and discharge date are for the same day. It's April 1st, 2018.
Okay. I'll take that back from you.
Sure.
And can you please tell me what 7C is?
7C is a medication administration record of 2 medications.
And is this for the same patient?
It is.
And
Mrs.
during the
Jeremiah.
same time?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recall treating this patient?
I don't.
Okay. After looking at the discharge summary and everything, can you recall what happened with this patient?
Yes. Sorry, I guess I have to backtrack. I vaguely remember the situation. And then reviewing the records, yes, I do.
Okay. Your Honor, do you care if I publish the history and physical? Okay.
It's not working well with me. I guess the first spot, I can guess the second.
Dr. Jones.
Okay. Looks like it's on the screens.
If it's easier, Your Honor, I can just have the witness read it to herself and then
No,
explain.
as I explained to the jury yesterday, they're coming in Friday to fix all the little problems here. We're going to be dealing with this all day. I'd rather take a couple minutes now.
Okay.
Do you have it turned on there?
It's on the TV screens on these, but I
Work
don't.
up there first, and then it
Yeah, and then
stopped
it-
working there and started working on the street, so it's pretty off.
Are you actually able to see the doc
On the
on the
tables.
screen?
Yeah.
Because it's not on mine up here.
It's not?
Dun, dun, dun. This one's on me, guys. Since we're going to be using it all day, we might as well solve the problem now. And it's Paul. Good morning. It just doesn't seem like a morning without seeing you.
You know what they say about a day without sunshine.
Yeah. Okay, that's your new nickname, Sunshine. You picked it. You got it. Looks like it's got something going on up there. I brought the screen down from up here,
Okay.
and we had like private show up on there a couple times.
That's a good thing.
Well, it's just not getting it his home yet, but are we better to wait till a break and then let you do your voodoo, or?
No idea why.
Well, that tells me we're going to go without it, and you might want to bring the TV back. Of course, as soon as we go to break, it'll start working. Why don't we work without it? He'll bring the TV in. We'll hook it up for the jury so that you can show directly off the pad.
All right.
Okay? Thank you, Paul. I mean, Sunshine.
Your Honor, may I reapproach the witness?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just show you the history physical. That way you can read it real quick to refresh your memory. Sure. Once you've done that, just go ahead and hand it back to me.
I don't know what that is, but it's concerning because it sounds like it's coming from behind that door.
Okay. Thank you. Does that help you to recall
Can I suggest some 3M oil?
Sorry, folks.
It'll just take them a minute, that way you guys can see what they're talking about. And you were worried about getting your steps in today? I know. He retires in 13 days, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm surprised he's as nice as he is now.
I'm surprised I can get up in Dallas.
Are you able to see that, doctor?
Yeah. Am I allowed to move to the end? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this is good. Okay.
Just whenever you get away from the mic, you just gotta be a little directional.
You can't see it in the corner.
Sorry.
You might be able to blow it up a little bit.
Does that help at all?
Back in front?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
Is that all right? All right. And is this the document I showed you just a moment ago?
Can you show the top part? Sorry. Yes.
And can you tell me just this top part here? Is this your entire discharge summary right there on the top?
This is, I will admit, this is a lazy version of a discharge summary, just basically because I've already said everything that needed to be said in the history and physical on my admission paperwork. So this is rather than reiterating the same thing and copying and pasting an entire portion, this is me just saying refer to the H&P.
Okay.
It's lazy.
Okay. And you say H&P, what do you mean by that?
Sorry. H&P is history and physical. Every patient that comes through the hospital, admitted to the hospital, needs a history and physical and a discharge summary.
All right. Is this the history and physical for that same patient?
Yes.
For that same admission date and discharge date?
Yes.
And you read through this just a moment ago, correct? Could you give me a summary as to what happened with this patient?
Yes, she was I think she was 57, I apologize. 57, Miss Jeremiah Hodge. She came into the hospital in full cardiac arrest. She was walking out to the car with family, and she suddenly passed out and lost pulse. Someone, I don't know the details, but someone, a bystander of some sort, started doing chest compressions on her while 911 was called. When EMS arrived, she had no pulse. They took over care, and they brought her to the hospital. She was still in cardiac arrest, meaning no pulse, when she arrived to the hospital, actively doing chest compressions. After a series of medications, continued chest compressions, she got a pulse back, and they did an EKG to see if anything was awry, and she had an ST elevation myocardial infarction, and big word just means heart attack, but the type that needs to emergently go to a heart catheterization to see if there's any blockages in her heart. So a STEMI alert was called, an ST elevation MI alert was called. The cardiologist came to the hospital, brought her to the heart catheterization lab, and they did a heart catheterization. They sprayed dye in her heart to see if there's any lesions or blockages that would amount to what happened to her, and they didn't find any. They just found a whole bunch of old changes, but nothing that was lack of any blood flow that would cause a heart attack. She still had a pulse at this point. They brought her to the ICU, the intensive care unit, and in the intensive care unit, she lost her pulse again. A code blue was called, where pharmacy, nursing staff, all the ancillary staff that you need during a code blue to attend to a patient came. Still doing chest compressions, and I think eventually they got a pulse back, and she was on a ventilator with all full-blown life support. And Dr. Husel had a conversation with the family about her poor prognosis, and the family decided to withdraw care. And that's when she was taken off the ventilator and had passed. And all of this happened without me seeing the patient.
So you had zero contact with this
No,
patient?
this is me just summarizing what happened during her very brief hospital stay. This all happened in a series of maybe less than 2 hours, I believe.
So you wrote this discharge summary, correct?
Yes.
And if you didn't see this patient, how did you know what to write in the discharge summary?
I reviewed the notes, and between the emergency department notes, the squad notes that are scanned into the computer, the heart catheterization notes, the note from the cardiologist, and then notes from the ICU, either a brief note from the nursing staff or Dr. Husel's notes. And my job is to summarize at that point because I hadn't seen the patient.
Did you review the entire medical record from this patient?
Define entire, I mean, no.
Page 1 to page...
No, I would have no time to do that.
And did you review the medication administration record for this patient as part of your discharge preparation?
No.
I'm sorry?
No,
Okay, and why not?
it's not part of my, I would have nothing to gain from reviewing a medication administration record, the MAR. I would have nothing to gain from that.
And why do you say you would have nothing to gain from that?
Because she had passed, and my job is to summarize her hospital stay up until that point, and it's not my normal practice to review the MAR when I go through and do a discharge summary, just because it's relatively low yield. I have nothing, there would be no addition to my discharge summary based on that.
All right, and did you prepare the death certificate for Ms. Hodge?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to hand the witness State's Exhibit 18G. Can you go ahead and tell me what this is, please?
It's the death certificate for Mrs. Jeremiah Hodge.
And did you prepare this?
I did.
And did you sign off on it?
I did.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I publish? I don't believe there's any objections from defense.
No, it was stipulated too early.
All right. So I'm showing 18G. And is this the death certificate that I just showed you?
It is.
And what is the cause of death that you list here?
Multi-organ failure.
And can you tell me the difference between the multi-organ failure that you put here and then the two other things below that?
Yeah, so I have to put in this, once again, it's an educated guess as to what happened. So my first diagnosis on a death certificate is what likely led to her demise as reviewing the records. And then it's due to, if I can come up with reasons or rationale, or secondary to. So multi-organ failure would be exactly what it says. It would be multiple organs have shut down because of. And then in her case, it would be because of cardiopulmonary arrest, the prolonged arrest that she had, where she was without a pulse for, I would have to count out how long it took for her to get to the emergency department when she lost her pulse outside the hospital, including the ones that happened in the hospital, and then probably due to, and this is all a best guess based on her labs that I have.
And why couldn't you just put cardiopulmonary address?
Because it's always,
arrest, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's because it's due to something. So cardiopulmonary arrest doesn't just happen. I could put sudden cardiac death. I could have put that, but she had other things that I could go off of based off of her labs, I suppose.
Are there requirements of what you have to put in the death certificate?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
There's a whole published what you can and cannot write on death certificates. If something is due to something, you can't put it as your primary. I'm not really sure how I can explain that better.
So there are general restrictions on what you can and cannot put
Yes.
on a death certificate?
Yes.
What happens if you don't follow those?
It gets rejected and it comes back to me. So this is done online and it's very easy for me to do it. If you see it handwritten, the handwritten ones mean that somebody actually handwrote it and then submitted it to the funeral home, and then it goes to wherever it goes from there. But then it can be rejected and come back to me saying, no, it needs to say due to something. This makes it very easy since it's the electronic death registry system, and I can type out why the patient died and submit it right then and there, and then it automatically gets rejected and says, no, you need to write something different. So a lot of this is done for me. I mean, I have had some get rejected and I have to reinvent the wheel of why I think the patient died.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Lopez?
Do you want me to leave him up here?
Court, counsel. Morning, everyone. Morning. All right. Is it DeKiel?
DeKiel.
Perfect. My last name gets butchered all the time. First thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm going to do it to you. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Let's start off with the date in which you did these records for Ms. Hodge.
Okay.
That was in April of 2018, correct?
Yes.
And fair to say, in your role as a hospitalist at Mount Carmel, or with all these other hospitals, you see a large number of patients,
Yes.
especially between 2018 and now?
Yes.
Is it a fair assumption to say that absent having reviewed these records with the prosecution, you didn't have an independent memory of anything about Ms. Hodge?
Yes.
Okay. And then I believe after even reviewing the records, you said that you vaguely remember what had happened, right?
I remember the... Yes, I remember the evening, and I remember code blue going off, and that's all I remember. Otherwise, I have lots of patients that I have to also see, and yes.
Let's get into medical records. You'd agree with me that medical records and the things that are put in them are extremely important, right?
Yes.
Every progress note is important, right?
Yes.
Every consultation,
Yes.
every history and physical,
Yes.
every discharge summary.
Yes.
And they're important because they're relied upon by a number of people, right?
Yes.
The patients, if they are getting discharged and haven't passed away, they rely on that, right?
Yes.
Their primary care physicians can rely on that, right?
Yes.
Other doctors rely on it.
Yes.
Now, in fact, they're so important that even on direct, you mentioned that death certificates have a whole, I think you mentioned a book of policies where they can reject things if they're not done appropriately, right?
Yes.
And that just shows just how important these records and the death certificates are to everyone involved in these patients' care, right?
Yes.
Now, I understand you testified that it's not your typical practice to review the medical administration record, the MAR, right?
Yes.
But if you chose to, nothing would have prevented you from doing so, right?
No.
In fact, every medication she received is in her electronic medical record, which is accessible to you, right?
Yes.
Nothing's hidden there, right?
Nothing's hidden, no.
So everything that Dr. Husel did with Jeremiah Hodge was completely transparent to every physician, employee, nurse, pharmacist, anyone that had access to the electronic medical record of Mount Carmel, correct?
Yes.
Nothing hidden whatsoever.
No, nothing would be hidden.
Now, I understand that in preparing your history and physical and the discharge summary that you reviewed, you gave a long list there. I was trying to write it. The ICU notes, code blue notes, all kinds of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, yes. I said, mm-hmm.
For Sam's sake, doesn't really translate on a transcript.
She caught herself. She's okay.
All right. Now, let's get into the history and physical, which I believe is State's Exhibit 7B. Now, you have to forgive me. I have to walk back and forth to make sure this whole thing is on there. Okay. Did everyone see?
Do you have a question?
I just want to make sure everyone can see it.
Okay, well,
It's
that's
hard without the screen to know what's...
Move on.
All right. Now let's go piece by piece of this. I know you gave a summary on direct examination, but I want to get a little bit more specific about some things you put in your history and physical.
Okay.
Now first, you noted that she had a history of hypertension. That's high blood pressure, correct?
Correct.
Dyslipidemia, that's a cholesterol problem, right?
Correct.
CAD with stents, that means that she has a history of coronary artery disease, right?
Correct.
In fact, coronary artery disease is so severe that it required stenting to continue to remove blockage in her heart,
Previous stenting, yes.
indicating that she had had a history
Yes.
of heart problems so severe it required medical intervention at prior dates, correct?
Yes.
Now, that's the history she had prior to what happened where she had that first heart attack, correct?
Correct.
Now, when she arrived, she was found to be astolic. That meant she had no pulse, right?
Flatlined, yes.
Flatlined. And she was given 2 milligrams of epinephrine and remained without pulse with active chest compressions. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would have to review or go off of it because I don't remember the details, but yes, that's what I wrote, yes.
Okay. So epinephrine is a form of life support, correct?
Yes,
It's intended to bring your heart back.
yes,
And regardless of that first round of life support on the first heart attack, she still had no pulse and they were actively beating her chest as she was brought to the hospital.
correct.
Now, she's then given another milligram of epinephrine, 1 amp, is that correct?
Ampule,
Of bicarbonate and calcium gluconate. That's also life support, right?
yes,
So just to keep count, first heart attack, 2 doses of forms of life support, right?
What do you mean by 2 forms of life support?
The first time she received epinephrine, 2 milligrams, right? Still had no pulse.
I'm sorry, yes.
And then the second time she gets 1 milligram of epinephrine, she gets bicarbonate and calcium gluconate, right?
Yes,
So the first attempt to revive her with a form of life support didn't work and a second round was initiated, correct?
yes.
Okay. So,
Just to clarify though, there would be 3 rounds of advanced life support at this point. It says every round will get 1 milligram of epinephrine.
Okay.
So if you count out the epinephrines, that would tell you how many so-called rounds of life support. If you're using life support, I'm using, life support would work. We'll use that term.
please feel free to correct me. So we're at first heart attack, 3 rounds of life support then, right?
Yes.
All right. She then regains her pulse, but is found to be hypotensive, right?
Yes.
And then the pressors are started. Pressors are vasopressors, correct?
Vasopressors, yes.
And that's intended to keep her blood pressure elevated enough for her to live.
Essentially, yes. It clamps down on blood vessels that you don't need to survive and shunts that blood to vital organs that you absolutely need to survive if your blood pressure is low.
Okay, so keeping count, we're still at first heart attack, 4 different rounds of life support at this point, right?
I don't want to say heart attack because a heart attack implies that there's a blockage of some sort, and I don't know if there's a blockage of some sort at this point. She has no pulse for some reason, but I don't want to say heart attack because I don't know if it's an actual heart attack.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Her heart is not working.
There you go. Okay.
She's had 4 rounds of life support at this point.
An arrest.
Okay. It's okay. One of the things is you both want to talk at the same time. I got to avoid that.
My husband says that too. Arrest is what the term I would use.
Okay. First round of arrest,
There you go.
fourth round of life support at this point, correct?
Correct.
She then lost her pulse again, and then is given another round of epinephrine. She's getting another round of epinephrine and aspirin, right?
Are you able to use a cursor to see where you are?
Yeah, let me just point you to it.
She has a pointer with that too, she can use that.
I know, I think she's asking me to point it out to her where we are. Oh,
I'm trying to follow him.
okay. So,
Do you want to use this?
see where it says pressors were started?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is where we agreed that we're at
Yes.
the first arrest, fourth round of life support, right?
Yes.
Okay. She then loses her pulse again, correct?
Yes.
And then she gets another round of epinephrine.
Yes.
So we're at 5 rounds. of
Yes.
life support, 2 arrests.
Yes.
All right. She then regains her pulse, right?
Yes.
Let me do what you mentioned, the heart catheterization.
Yes.
She's then started on levofed. That's another form of life support, right?
It's probably the same vasopressor that was initiated in the emergency department. She was started on. That was probably a typo on my end. It should have said continued on levofed drip. This is an assumption on my end. The emergency department.
Yeah, I need to interrupt you.
Don't do an assumption.
Bingo.
Got it.
Okay, whoa. Let's do a question, okay?
Does it say started or continued there?
It should say continued.
Regardless, we're at what? 1, 2, 3 arrests, and let's say, call it numerous rounds of life.
Numerous, yes.
There you go. Okay, she's then intubated for respiratory failure. That means that now not only is her heart failing, but her lungs are as well.
It kind of all goes together, yes. If somebody loses their pulse, the next step is putting them on a ventilator for life support. Yes.
Without your heart, your lungs can't work.
Yes.
Her body's failing,
Correct.
despite numerous attempts at life support.
Correct.
Resuscitation goes on from 1929, that's 729, right?
Yes.
Until 806.
Yes.
Roughly 37 minutes of after her heart stopping multiple times and numerous forms of life support, but then resuscitating her for 37 minutes to get that pulse back.
You have to remember that there was also an arrest outside the hospital where chest compressions were started outside the hospital, and I don't have the time that would be on the ambulance report for actually when it all started.
No, I'm speaking to this in our timeline where we are here.
Yes.
So not the CPR that went on for a while before she got there. I'm talking about now where she's getting resuscitation efforts
Yes.
at the hospital.
Yes.
And this is after her heart having failed,
Yes.
her lungs having failed,
Yes.
and her having had multiple rounds of life support.
Correct.
She's actively dying despite numerous rounds of life support.
Sustained.
Is she improving despite these efforts with life support?
No.
She's then brought back from the cath lab in PEA arrest. What does that mean?
Pulseless electrical activity arrest. It just essentially means that she might have, she has no pulse. She has no pulse.
So despite
It's an arrest.
EMS, the ER department, cardiologists, all these people attempting to resuscitate her, her heart keeps on stopping.
Correct.
And this is also, again, despite all the different forms of life support she's being given, correct?
Correct.
And then you speak to, initially, a code blue was called. Now, I know you don't have an independent memory as to what you reviewed in this case,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you indicated a code blue was called and that Dr. Husel was involved, right?
Yes.
Mr. Honor?
You may.
Showing that the witness was labeled Joint Exhibit 7, page 133. Without saying what that is.
Okay.
Do you recognize that to be a code blue sheet?
It is.
And this is a code blue sheet referring to Jeremiah Hodge, correct?
Yes.
It's the same code blue sheet you referred to in your history and physical there, where you referenced Dr. Husel, right?
Yes. I don't remember specifically looking at this when.
Can we approach real quick here?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, get to know each other.
You didn't like the granola bars I dumped on your table?
Where did that go? All good, sir? Doctor, when you referenced the code blue and Dr. Husel in your history and physical, that would have required you to have gotten that information from somewhere, right?
Yes.
And that would be the code blue sheet, correct?
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. I don't necessarily look at the code blue sheet. If something like this was to occur, normally there would be a summary, another physician who is running the code. There has to be a physician running a code. So normally there's a brief note or a progress note of somebody who ran the code. I don't usually look at the code blue sheets unless something was didn't make sense in the note.
Understood. And at this time of night, when a code blue occurs, the ICU doctor for that shift is the one who runs the code blue, correct?
If that person, whoever can respond fast enough first. So usually if a code occurs in the ICU, it would be the ICU doctor.
And that ICU doctor on that shift was Dr. Husel, correct?
Correct.
So Dr. Husel was running the code that night regarding Jeremiah Hodge, correct?
I would have to look at the code blue sheet.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You can approach, but lay your foundation first.
Would looking at the code blue sheet refresh your recollection as to who ran the code that night?
Yes, it's,
Your Honor, I don't think she has independent knowledge.
Okay, well, let's see if this refreshes the memory. That's the issue.
Your Honor, I don't think there's a memory that can be.
Okay, you're done.
May I approach?
You may.
oh my gosh, the signatures, geez.
Okay, just review it. Does that refresh your memory?
No, I didn't see it. I don't know. It looks like his signature, but I don't know. It looks like a W and an
Okay,
H.
stop.
Sorry.
Doesn't refresh his memory. Okay, go from there. Your doctor's memory.
Okay, so let's take it a step back. Dr. Husel was the ICU doctor that night, correct?
Yes.
Code blue occurred with Jeremiah
Yes.
Hodge, right?
Yes. It must be Dr. Husel that ran it.
Objection, speculation.
This is me using notes. Sorry.
Relax, let me do my job.
Sorry.
Okay? I'll permit it. Next question.
The code blue was successful, correct? Meaning the team that ran the code resuscitated her?
Can you put up the discharge summary or the history and physical again, just so I can look to see what I wrote? Yes, it was successful.
So Dr. Husel, and let me just take a step back. When a code blue occurs, it means that the patient is actively dying, correct?
Yes,
It's an emergency situation.
yes,
In fact, I believe you mentioned on direct examination that, Actually, why don't you tell the jury all the people that are involved in a code blue situation?
Pharmacy for medication, providing medications, nursing staff, a phlebotomist to draw blood, a doctor, multiple doctors maybe if they're on shift, several other ancillary staff, extra staff, if you will, to line up and do chest compressions. Each round is 2 minutes, so it gets very tiring. Multiple people need to tag in. That's usually the bulk of them.
And Dr. Husel's running that show, right?
Yes, in this instance.
Okay. And she was resuscitated because of Dr. Husel that night, right?
Objection.
Again, sustained.
She was resuscitated after the code blue, correct?
Yes,
She didn't die.
she did not die, no.
So Dr. Husel, running the code blue, resuscitated Jeremiah Hodge prior to the palliative extubation.
Yes,
And in fact, that was 23 minutes prior to the extubation, correct?
I would need to time it out. I'll take your word for it.
Now, this may seem like a fairly ridiculous question, but in your review of all these notes, and everything you did review when preparing this history of the physical, did you see any notes or anything that would give you any indication that Ms. Hodge angered Dr. Husel?
No?
Did you see any notes that indicated that Dr. Husel, for some reason, after resuscitating her, decided that he wanted to kill her?
No?
Objection.
Sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the last question and answer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did anyone tell you that she cut him off in traffic or something?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, I understand that you said when you were doing your discharge summary and the death certificate that you referred to it as an educated guess.
Yes?
Nothing to gain from having looked at the MAR, right?
Yes.
Now, and that's because when you're reviewing
Okay, identify it for the record.
It's the same exhibit, Your Honor. Still showing the witness State's Exhibit 7B. Do you see that list 1 through 14?
Yes.
So you felt there was nothing to gain by looking at the MAR because you looked at all these different things from all these different notes, correct? All the diagnoses.
I made those diagnoses based on vitals, her labs, and why she came into the hospital.
Okay, so you actually diagnosed these things. They were put in your discharge summary.
Some of them may have come from the emergency department physician and his documentation, but going off of any abnormals that I see on labs, that's what you're seeing for the diagnoses that you're seeing. It's a medical definition of any lab abnormality.
I'm going to show you the first page of your discharge summary
Sure.
because it appears that the State's Exhibit doesn't have the first page.
Okay.
I'll label this, Your Honor, as Joint Exhibit. Pardon me. Joint Exhibit 7, page 6. This is where you actually put the active and final diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
Let me move that up a little bit. So this is where you actually put in your discharge summary the diagnosis that you made and others made as to what you believe was the cause of death of Ms. Hodge, right?
Yes.
Now, we're going to go back to how we talked about how important medical records are, okay?
Sure.
Now, I know you referred to it as an educated guess, And you felt that you didn't need to look at the MAR because there was nothing to gain from it, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's a compound question, start again.
Just transition, Your Honor, just to get to
I understand what it is. No.
She required life support, right?
Yes.
Despite that life support, her situation worsened, right?
Yes.
And that same situation is what caused her death, right?
Okay. Sustained.
You put as the final diagnosis all 14 of those things, right?
Yes.
And it's some of the same things that you put on her death certificate, correct?
Yes.
And that's because you need to put, and I quote from what you said on direct examination, whatever happened that led to that person's death on those important documents, right?
Yes.
So in your training experience based off your diagnosis, those things...
He hasn't gotten the question out.
Would you have put something on the discharge summary or death certificate?
Objection, speculative.
Okay, hold on. You scrap the first question, and I'll have to sustain on this. Do you want a sidebar?
No, Your Honor, I got 3 words to the question, so I don't know.
Well, one of
wouldn't
those
put anything-
words was clearly objectionable, so.
You wouldn't put anything on a death certificate that you didn't believe was accurate as to a cause of death, right?
No.
Because it's important, right?
Yes.
Same thing with the discharge summary.
Yes.
And in fact, it's the most immediate cause of death you put on those documents, right?
Yes. For the death certificate.
For the death certificate. The document with all those rules, regulations, and potential rejection possibilities, right?
Yes.
Asked and answered.
One moment, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So we've established already you have not read, or you did not read the medication administration record, correct?
I did not.
Just a starting off point, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's do, I'll let the question stand, but from now on, let's keep it proper terms.
When you wrote your discharge summary for Ms. Hodge, were you aware that she had been given 800?
Objection. We get a sidebar for that?
Yeah. Tell me when you're ready. I know, I'll wait. You. So the objection is sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, you disregard the last question. Next question, please.
Thank you. Did any of the progress notes that you reviewed indicate any medications that had been administered by Dr. Husel?
I don't know. I would have to go back through and look at his notes.
Okay. So then, just to clarify, you did not review any of the medications that were administered by Dr. Husel to this patient?
No.
It was asked and answered, but let's move on.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, ma'am, you may step down. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state called Dr. Rohit. Stand.
I'm going to, pull it up.
Not happy day in paradise, man. your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but yourself to God?
Yes, sir.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and have a seat? You can lower your mask if you wish. Okay. Okay, I need you to go ahead and have a seat, relax. And I need you to state your name. You got an aerial mic in front of you there, so state your name and spell it for me.
Sure.
That way my court reporter can hear your diction.
First name Rohit, R-O-H-I-T. Last name Chand, C-H-A-N-D.
Okay. You're a doctor?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I've never known a doctor that couldn't knock that mic down. So let's get a little volume there because these people have to hear you and you're in kind of a fishbowl here. Okay?
No problem.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Chand, where are you currently employed?
I'm employed with Columbus Inpatient Care.
All right, I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit louder because I'm even having trouble hearing you. So could you repeat your answer to that, please?
I'm employed with Columbus Inpatient Care.
And what is your job title with them?
I'm a hospitalist.
And what type of education or training do you have to hold that position?
So after finishing medical school, I joined the internal medicine residency at Mount Carmel. After my training there, took my board exam for internal medicine, board certified, and then I joined Columbus Inpatient Care.
And where did you attend medical school, sir?
I went to medical school, Windsor University.
And when did you graduate from medical school?
I graduated in 2011, I believe.
All right, and from what we're hearing, there's a fellowship or residency first?
Correct, residency
And where did you do your residency at?
at Mount Carmel.
And what year were you licensed to practice medicine in the state of Ohio?
Well, when you start residency, you get your training license, so 2012 when I joined, and then when you graduate, you get your full license, so that was 2015.
And are there any continuing education requirements for you to maintain your licensure?
There are.
And has that licensure remained in effect since 2015?
It has.
Now, what did you practice your residency in?
Internal medicine.
And are you board certified at all?
I am.
And what are you board certified in?
Internal medicine.
And when were you board certified?
2015.
And has that been maintained since then?
It has.
Now, you use the term hospitalist. Can you explain to us what that is?
Hospitalist essentially.
We've heard the definition of hospitalist about 18 times.
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir, you can answer.
Essentially, as my colleagues have said, we're the primary care providers in the hospital. Essentially, we admit patients, take care of them on the floors, and then eventually discharge them.
Okay, so other than admitting patients, what else is part of your job duties as a hospitalist with Mount Carmel?
So essentially, when you're the rounding physician, our job is to round on essentially see all the patients that are admitted to the hospital and tend to their day-to-day needs.
Now, I note that Mount Carmel's hospital records has an attending physician listed for each patient. Tell us what that means.
Essentially, that would mean we're the go-to person for anybody who needs any assistance or information, or we are essentially like the quarterback. We're if we need anybody on board, we get consultants on board, but we are the primary care providers, essentially.
And in 2018, were you performing the same type of duties as a hospitalist at then Mount Carmel West?
I was.
From January 11th of 2018 to January 14th of 2018, did you treat a patient by the name of Brandy McDonald?
I did.
And Your Honor, if I may approach the witness, I believe we have got this figured out to make life easy for everybody.
Okay.
Sir, I'm handing you a mark for identification at bottom here, states Exhibit 5C. Could you identify that for us?
This is a discharge summary.
And who's that for?
It's for Miss Brandy McDonald.
All right. And sir, I'm going to leave that up there with you, so if you need to refer to it, you're able to. And what I'm going to do is put on the big screen here for the jury. All right, and can you see what's on the big screen real quick, sir, at all? No. Let me see. This is difficult, isn't it? Can you see the number 5C at the bottom there, sir?
I can.
All right, and then at the top, what patient is that for? A little bit further down.
Brandy McDonald.
So is this what you have in front of you there, sir?
I do.
Okay. And what were the dates she was admitted into the hospital, sir?
Looks like she was admitted January 11th, 2018, and discharged January 14th.
And during that time period that she was in the hospital, did you in fact see her?
I did.
Do you remember her?
I don't.
Okay. Feel free to look at the discharge summary and see if that refreshes your memory, sir.
Vaguely, but I can see what I've documented here.
All right, what was Ms. McDonald in the hospital for at that time period, sir?
Looks like my partner admitted her after she was sent by her outpatient oncologist for essentially abnormal liver function tests.
Okay. And obviously, from this, does she have several diagnoses that you provided to her in the discharge summary?
Towards the end of the stay, once as her care progressed.
Okay. Before we get into her details, can you explain to us what you look at and how you arrive at your discharge summaries when you're discharging a patient from the hospital?
Progress notes, consultant notes, any pertinent imaging that was done, labs. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So in then creating the discharge summary, how do you go about doing that?
Same way, just review all those things that I mentioned.
Okay. Where would you derive the active or final diagnoses from in the hospital records?
From our progress notes, from ongoing progress notes from the day before.
Okay. And then turning to page 2 of that summary, Exhibit 5C, there's a part that is labeled, and let me double check this, hospital course. Can you explain to us what that is?
Essentially, it's a brief summarization of what occurred when she was in the hospital.
And can you give us a summary of what occurred with Ms. McDonald?
So according to this, she's, unfortunately young, who had metastatic ovarian cancer. She had multiple surgeries.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit and slow down a little bit.
Okay, so she's a 37-year-old female who came in with abnormal liver function tests. She had a diagnosis of metastatic ovarian cancer.
I'm going to stop you here. What does that mean to us?
Cancer of the ovaries had spread to all her or some of her organs.
Okay, go ahead.
Looks like she was on a clinical trial study for a chemotherapy agent because the traditional treatments did not work for her.
Okay.
So she was on trial with some medications that the oncologists were treating her as an outpatient. It appears that that's the direct reason why she was admitted, because the presumption was that the chemotherapy side effect essentially caused her liver function deteriorate.
Okay.
So she was admitted to the hospital for that. I consulted as my part of my job to get the specialists on board. So it looks like we consulted the oncologist. I believe gastroenterology was also consulted because the liver has to do with the GI system.
Okay.
She was started on some steroids to see if this would start healing her liver, and it appears that she continued to deteriorate. With that, she developed kidney failure. Then the kidney doctors were consulted, and eventually her respiratory, her lungs started to not function properly, so she was transferred to the intensive care unit.
Okay.
And it looks like she got intubated, so which means they had to place a breathing tube emergently to stabilize her. And there were talks about starting dialysis on her for her kidneys, just to do anything that we can to help her, but it looks like she did not tolerate dialysis. She actually started to require vasopressors, life support medication on top of the ventilator. And then, the code status discussions were held, and eventually looks like her liver just went into fulminant failure. And then I guess she was palliatively extubated. So once it was discussed with the family, and then she passed.
So she had both liver issues as well as severe kidney issues at this point?
That's correct.
And I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Actually, I'm going to switch to the last page of the discharge summary. I'll double check and make sure you can see it. What led to Ms. McDonald's discharge from the hospital? On the last page of the discharge summary, do you have that, sir?
Can you repeat the question?
What led to her discharge from the hospital, Ms.
Her
McDonald?
demise.
And that would have been in a court after her palliative extubation?
Yes.
Now, in looking at the records for your discharge summary, did you look at what medication was administered to Ms. McDonald during the palliative extubation?
I did not.
Would that be something that you would typically do?
I do not.
Why?
For a consented palliative extubation, there's no reason to believe anything of the sort. So we have a reason for why they're already there deteriorating, and that's the end of that.
So you would have no idea what medication was administered to her at the time they withdrew the vent?
I did not.
Now, sir, during your treatment, did you treat her during the time she was at the hospital? Do you recall?
Just reviewing the records.
Okay. So nothing else specific to that?
Nothing.
Now, for Ms. McDonald, did you complete a death certificate?
I did.
And I'm going to put up here what's been marked for identification. Let me see if I can see that up there. Can you see the number there?
Yes.
And what number is that, sir?
18E.
Okay. And this is a death certificate for which patient? I believe you have a copy at the back of your...
Yes, Brandy Lynn McDonald.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about when you are asked to fill out a death certificate. How do you do that, sir?
So death certificates come to us sometimes days after, so sometimes I could be off shift, I could be at home, and it looks like on this death certificate, this was a cremation.
Okay.
So when a cremation occurs, the funeral home is really pressed on time because they need this to proceed.
Okay.
Without this, they cannot proceed with the cremation. So you essentially briefly review the record of, and then come up with the diagnosis that you felt led to the demise.
All right, and we've heard a little bit of talk about this. What I see with Ms. McDonald is you have 2 lines filled out for the reason for death. Can you explain what this section means to us and how you would pick what goes in this section?
So the first line is immediate cause. So, I felt her immediate cause was, the reason she was admitted to the hospital because her liver was failing.
Okay.
And then why? And then another reason for her demise, metastatic ovarian cancer.
So, hepatic, am I saying that correctly? What, that means the liver failure?
Correct.
And then the secondary cause would be the metastatic ovarian cancer.
Correct.
And again, when you're filling this out, would you look at the medication provided to Ms. McDonald at the time she was palliative withdrawn?
No.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions. Jaime, I'll leave these up here if I need them. And he's got his copy still, so that'll be easier. Thank you, Paul.
Please court. So good morning. Dr. Shand, right?
Correct.
Doctor, I'm going to try and make this as brief as possible, okay? Doctor, I know you testified that you saw Brandy McDonald, but you don't remember her, correct?
Correct.
May I approach? This is just progress notes, so it's process. Doctor, fair to say you don't remember what you put in your progress note dated January 14th at 13:42 Eastern Standard Time?
I don't remember.
Would looking at that progress note refresh your recollection?
Which date are you asking for? Or just
It's
overall?
the first page.
For the first page, so for the 12th, you said 14th.
Okay, maybe it's not the first page.
He's got all of them.
I mean, I can go to the 14th. Yeah, that's fine.
Take a look at what to the 14th and see if that refreshes your memory.
Just the 12th.
You know what? Let's do it this way. Let's switch.
I have the 14th there.
Actual 14th progress note.
Sure.
Let's just switch.
Identify it.
Doctor, is your name on that document?
It is.
Okay, what does it say at the top of the document? It showed you different documents, so we have to put on the record what was shown.
Sure, it's a progress note.
I understand, but in the top corner, there's some writing there. What does it say?
Joint Exhibit 5.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, doctor, is that a fair and accurate depiction of your progress note on the 14th of January that year?
Yes.
Can we have that?
Sure.
Commissioner Pellicciar?
Any objection?
No objection, it's his note, Your Honor.
Okay. This impression that's listed, that's your initial impression as to what was going on with Ms. McDonald, correct?
Yeah, what you came to the hospital for.
Now, I can't see if it's here. Can you see the plan? Okay. Can you see that okay, doctor?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy, but yeah.
Okay. And you indicated that during the course of her stay, she became very acidotic, correct?
Correct.
She was started on bicarb, that's a form of life support, correct?
Sure.
Then overnight, her respiratory status deteriorated, correct?
Correct.
It required an ICU transfer, and I believe you referred to it on direct examination as an emergent intubation, correct?
Correct, correct.
Now, do you recall what documents you reviewed to reach that conclusion you put in your plan regarding her having to be intubated?
I reviewed the brief notes that were previously entered by the night team.
Would you have reviewed the operative procedure document regarding that intubation?
I did not.
Okay. Are you aware who performed that emergency intubation?
I don't.
Are you aware that Dr. Husel?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I would have to look through the records to see, because I don't remember.
The ICU is where that emergency intubation occurred, correct?
I wasn't present, so it could be on the floor, or it could be in the ICU. I don't remember if I wasn't there, so.
Who was the ICU doctor working that night?
Objection, Your Honor.
If you know, do you know who was working that night?
Dr. Husel?
Objection, it looks like he's guessing.
Well,
I'm
that's
just
a
saying
jury
because you might do
determination.
this.
I don't know the schedule. I mean, I'm assuming, obviously.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay. No question pending, strike the last answer there. New question.
So fair to say, regardless of who did it, she was on forms of life support, deteriorating, correct?
That's correct.
Required an emergency intubation, correct?
Correct.
And an emergency intubation is a form of a life-saving procedure, correct?
That's correct.
We don't know, you can't say who, but someone in the ICU at night did that.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's been asked and answered, yes, sustained.
Okay. This is, again, still referring to Joint Exhibit page 40, Joint Exhibit 5, page 46 and 47.
Is that the progress note still hanging?
Yeah, just the second page.
No problem. Just wanted to make sure.
This is still your progress note, right, doctor?
Yes.
And this is your assessment of her situation, is it not?
Correct.
She's critically ill.
Correct.
She's going to die.
It appears that way.
Poor prognosis.
Yes,
You met with the mother and father.
I did.
They didn't want heroic measures.
Correct.
Palliative care consulted, and the closed status changed, correct?
Yes.
So you took the initiative to speak to the family from Ms. McDonald, correct?
I did.
You delivered the news to them that her death was imminent, did you not?
I said she was critically ill and anything could happen, but I didn't
You felt
say
it. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to talk over you. That's my fault, son. But you felt it necessary to have that hard talk with Ms. McDonald's family.
yes.
Now let's go to your discharge summary, which would be State's Exhibit 5C. Can you see there where it lists all the different doctors?
Yes.
That's all the different doctors that were involved in Ms. McDonald's care, correct?
Some of them are partners with each other, so it doesn't necessarily mean every person saw them, but most of them did.
Fair to say you wouldn't have put them there if they had nothing to do with Ms. McDonald, right?
Correct.
Any one of these people tell you that they disagree with the fact that her death was imminent?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did any one of these people raise any concerns about the care that Ms. McDonald received? To you?
No.
Now, the active and final diagnosis. This is where I believe you testified what you believe to be the cause of her death. Correct?
Correct.
All right, you get it. That head nods don't turn out on the transcript. Now, you referred to on direct examination as, or rather, when you were asked about why you don't review the medical administration record after you use your term consented palliative extubation, you felt it wasn't necessary, correct?
Can you repeat that?
You didn't feel it was necessary to review
That's correct.
the medical administration record during a consented palliative extubation, right?
Correct.
Now, to be clear, this is a terminal vent withdrawal, correct?
Correct.
Emphasis on the term terminal. Can you explain to the jury what the word terminal means?
Terminal means that all parties have felt it's the end of life situation. So at this point, it's just to proceed with comfort measures and just move forward.
And that comfort measures, are you familiar with what kind of comfort measures are used in palliative extubation?
Yes.
So that goes with saying that based off of comfort measures, you're familiar with the doctrine of billable effect, correct?
No.
Okay, so when comfort measures are administered, isn't it true that you're no longer treating symptoms?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. We can have a sidebar.
What does comfort care mean to you?
Alleviation of symptoms, pain.
Okay. But you're not treating symptoms of underlying illness anymore, correct?
Correct.
And that's because to do so is futile at that point because death is imminent, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Why do you not treat the symptoms of the underlying illness as opposed to providing comfort?
Okay, you're asking for an opinion or you're asking for his practice?
In your practice, why do you treat, or why do you not treat the symptoms of an underlying illness and provide comfort at that point?
I'm not understanding.
In your practice, is there any point in treating symptoms of an underlying illness at the time of a terminal event withdrawal?
No.
Why?
It's futile.
Because death is imminent, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Same.
You don't feel that reviewing a medical administration record during a terminal event withdrawal matters, right?
You asked and answered that
It's a
once.
transitional, Your Honor.
Sustained. My own objection.
Why do you feel it's not relevant? Or excuse me, make clear. Why do you feel it's not relevant when putting down these things in a discharge summary or what you put in a death certificate?
Because in general, like when when a patient comes in and we know what's going on, we have a reason for what would be their cause for their demise. So when they reach that terminal point, there's no reason to go through, like I said before, consented palliative extubation and what meds were given to them.
Because you know at that point that their underlying illness.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
What happens when you remove life support from someone with the type of illnesses that Ms. McDonald happened to have?
To die.
Die, right? Quickly, right? Based off her conditions?
Sustained.
Can you predict when someone's going to die when they're taking off life support?
No.
Could be moments, right?
Could be.
Minutes?
Could be days.
Don't know though. Could be from anything from a second to a week, right?
Sure, yes.
But what you do know is that when you remove life support from someone who needs it, they die.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
One moment, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Can I call that progress now?
Do you have long because they're due for a break?
It depends on his answer. It may be a little longer than I would typically go, so we could do a break now, Your Honor.
Let's do a break. It's been a while. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take 15 minutes. We'll get started at 5 till 11.
All right.
Have a great break. Enjoy the break, guys. Okay, Doctor, we're going to get back to you pretty quickly here. You're currently on the stand. You can't discuss your testimony. So if someone comes and asks you about how you testified, you disregard the question. Understood? Okay, you can go on and out and relax for a second. Hold on, don't go too far. We're going to go on the record here. You can go now. Anything for the record?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Nothing for the record.
You're not on the record. He is.
Nothing for
Okay.
the record.
Thanks.
I'm not trying to ignore you.
That's okay. Still we're on the record.